Hello, my name is Peggy Adams, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of the Flint area. With partners Flint Beat, represented by Jaquanda Johnson, and Communities First, represented by Joel Arnold, we're bringing you this forum today because we share a purpose to engage, empower, and educate Flint area voters. We're happy to bring you a virtual community forum today to help you decide which candidate for the Michigan State House 69th District who will get your vote. Questions will be asked by representatives from Flint Beat and League of Women Voters, while Communities First staff will ensure the forum remains on time and on schedule. All candidates who have qualified to be on the ballot were invited to participate in this event. However, not all candidates across our forums have chosen to do so. To follow up, be sure to check Vote 411 to check responses to our questionnaire, which contains some different questions. All participants were informed they would need to comply with certain rules, such as refraining from comments on other persons, and only take the opportunity to tell voters about their own qualifications, priorities, and outlook. All candidates are asked the same questions, and all have the same 2 minutes to answer them. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this today and being an engaged citizen. Now, I'm happy to introduce our candidates who are in the race for the 69th State House District in the Democratic primary. We have Ms. Kenyatta Dotson, Jennifer Almasi, and Jasper Ryan Martis. Have I pronounced your names correctly? Okay, then. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So I will begin with you, Ms. Almasi. Would you introduce yourself and give us a summary of your qualifications and skills that would make you an asset as a member of the State House?
Well, thank you, League of Women Voters, Flint Beat, and Community First for having this forum. My name is Jennifer Almasi. I'm a candidate for state rep, and I'm running because as a high school business and English teacher for 25 years, I've been able to meet with people and get them to communicate and find common ground, which is something we struggle to do at the state level. I've been elected in 2016 as a Flushing Township trustee as the only Democrat. And throughout my time in that role, as well as the Genesee County Metro Alliance, I was able to work with leaders on both sides of the aisle to make sure that we could get the job done. Most of the issues we can find common ground instead of just digging our heels in. And as a moderate and a Democrat, I know that we can do better. We've been able to do some great things this year with the legislation in supporting the education budget, and that's something I fought for and worked hard on for many years as a MEA union leader, and I know that Gretchen needs some support from us as well. So I think the only other thing I want to say is I've been in this community for about 15 years. I moved in about 2004, and I moved into Flushing, where I currently live, in 2013. And as a community member, I've been on my neighborhood board. I've joined local clubs and communities just to really work hard on making sure our community is the safe, small neighborhoods that we want. And our neighborhoods need to have somebody that's advocating for them. Now, one of the areas that I think that I will do the best in, and it's something that I think is a strong point of mine, is constituency services. And I bring the ability to be level-headed and common ground because I'm just like our voters. I own my own home. I had to get a student loan to pay for my college degree. And I know how hard these financial times have hit us. And to fight for our members is something that I am passionate about, as I've done as an educator.
Okay, that concludes your time. Ms. Dobson, the same. Will you introduce yourself and give us an overview of your skills and qualifications?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenyatta Dotson. Very happy to be in this space with you all. Thank you so very much to Flint Beat's Community First and League of Women Voters who continue to do a phenomenal job in making sure we're well informed. So in terms of my qualifications, I have been working and serving amongst community for well over 25 years, working at a grassroots level, making sure that the needs of families and individuals are cared for, listening to what the people are saying and also what they're experiencing, and then connecting with our local, state, and federal leaders in order to get the resources and services that we need at a grassroots level in order to have deeper impact, so that our families can be more successful, and stronger, and our communities can be stronger, and our educational systems can be stronger for our children, our teachers, our administrators, and everyone who's connected, to those institutions. I'm also a social worker by profession and by education. I'm a mental health professional. I have served in the military for well over 6 years, and like I said, I've just been a part of community, uh, not because my family pushed me to go into a certain space, or because a job was so appealing, but because I understand that the need is great. And I know that we have to do certain things in terms of our various roles in order to make a true impact within our families, our community, and our society as a whole.
Thank you. Mr. Martis, would you also give an overview of your experience, qualifications, and what would make you an asset as a member of the State House?
Yes, as stated before, thank you to the League of Women Voters, to Flint Beat, and to Communities First, and for the other folks in the race for taking part in this event. My name is Jasper Martis, and I'm a Democrat running for state representative. The lines for this new 69th district may be new, but my family's roots to our community stretch back well over a century. Whether it was the factory floor, the classroom, or the wide open field, each generation of my family has tried to figure out how best to serve others. For me, that's always been through government work. I went to work for Congressman Dan Kildee at a very young age as a caseworker, oftentimes talking folks through their most difficult times and difficult hours, veterans trying to get the care they needed, or seniors navigating Medicare and Social Security. Then I went to work for the Michigan House Democrats in Lansing, oftentimes being in the room where it happens, where the appropriations process is dealt with, where the budget is dealt with. And I learned through that experience, working for over a dozen different state representatives, that the only way a community like ours in Genesee County not just gets the resources it needs, but the respect it deserves, if it has an advocate room. I'm lucky enough to have the support of over a dozen different representatives from Detroit to Grand Rapids, back here to Genesee County. And it's not because I come from money or a political dynasty. It's because I've done the work. I've done the work that they've done, and I'm running to serve with them as well. There's a lot of issues that I'm focused on, but the biggest priority is because of the ARPA package and the bipartisan infrastructure package. DC is sending tens of billions of dollars to Lansing with just 5 years to spend it. The question is not, are they going to spend it? It's where and how. We've lived through folks moving away and families experiencing factories shutting down. We can't reverse that overnight, but I think if we use these funds effectively and in our community, we can begin to reverse that. And the only way that happens is if our community has an advocate in the room who understands the process and is ready on day one. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. And now Ms. Johnson will take the second question.
So I think we don't have Ms. Johnson right now. So Peggy, if you're able to ask it, that would be most appreciated.
Okay. What are the three most pressing issues facing your district? And if elected, how will you address them? Now, what we're going to do now is migrate through the alphabetical order. So I'll begin with you, Ms. Dotson. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure, thank you.
Okay, one more time. What are the three most pressing issues facing your district? And if elected, how will you address them?
Thank you. Thank you for that. The three most pressing issues that are affecting our district, some of the things that I've heard as I've gone throughout the district is, first of all, just listening to the people's voice, listening to what they have to say. We can make our own assumptions all day long about what we think people are feeling at a grassroots level, within their family, within their community. but we really need to hear the voice of the people. And I know this is also something that Representative Cherry always did before he made any decisions and before he even proposed any laws. And some of the things that I've heard going throughout all of the districts or all of the municipalities within our district is people want to feel safe. They want their children to be safe within their schools. They want to feel safe within their home, and they want to be safe within community. People are struggling within their families and within community. Inflation is really hurting families. Gas prices are really hurting families, and we need jobs. We need jobs. We need resources. We need services. Jasper is absolutely correct. Money is coming into our community, is coming into our state. But what we need to make sure is we have adequate, trusted allies and representatives at a state level who will make sure that those dollars truly touch and impact our family system so that we can have a livable wage, so that we can have the jobs that we need in order to sustain our family and to have stronger families, which also will result in stronger communities and a stronger educational system for our children, for our teachers, for our administrators, which ultimately gives us a holistic approach to having everything that we need as a society and as a district. So those are some of the things that I've heard in going out amongst the people within the 69th district.
Thank you. Mr. Martis, same question. What are the 3 most pressing issues facing the district? And if elected, how will you address them?
When I started knocking doors back in March, I noticed a trend that's continued throughout the past few months. I'm quite frankly shocked if I knock on a person's door and the person who answers the door is under the age of 40. I'm at an age now where there's a lot of folks who are a little bit older than me, a little bit younger than me. They graduate from high school, college, or trade school, and they move somewhere else. And there's a lot of factors that go into this, but the real reason that we've lost so many jobs in our community is our community's lack of voice. So there's a lot of issues that I hear about when I'm knocking on doors, and it all comes back to that idea of our community needing a voice. So 3 of my top priorities, and they sound broad, but I can get more into specifics, are investing in education, creating good paying jobs, and rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. And what underpins all of these ideas is making sure we use those ARPA and infrastructure funds effectively and efficiently. There's not a question of how are we going to pay for these different programs. We have those funds. It's just a question of where they're going to go. When it comes to education and being a advocate for our public schools, we need to make sure that we're investing in skilled trade opportunities and putting more mental health professionals in our public schools. Michigan has the worst counselor to student body ratio in the nation, and paying teachers more. When it comes to rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, it's doing that in a way that is climate change resilient. Some roads might have been able to be fixed in 10 years, a few years ago, but now because of climate change, those are going to need more repairs. So we need to do it in a climate resilient way. And finally, creating good paying jobs. If we reinvest here in Genesee County, not only are we creating economic security and opportunities for families that for too long have lacked a voice, we're also investing here in Genesee County. And when we reduce that supply chain issue, we're reducing one of the key causes of inflation. So I want to make sure that our community has an advocate in the room, that we can spend these ARPA and infrastructure funds effectively and efficiently. And no matter what program or idea we're talking about, whether it's making sure our public safety is getting funded effectively and efficiently, or investing to combat climate change, it all comes back to spending these funds effectively and efficiently and making sure that they're funded and it's spent here in Genesee County. Thank you.
Ms. Almasi, same question. 3 most pressing issues facing the district, and if elected, how will you address them?
Thank you. I'm going to go through my 3 big issues and break down each one. I think the pocketbook issues have been number 1 on our community members' minds every time I've knocked on doors. School safety, public safety, through revenue sharing costs that have been cut. And then the last one is education. So pocketbook issues involve so much more than just the gas prices that people are frustrated with. It includes having good, strong jobs that pay well, but also have health benefits, making sure that our pensions are no longer taxed because so many of our senior citizens are on these fixed incomes. And that pocketbook piece is very real. Me as a homeowner, I can feel it. I know what that looks like when our rising gas prices affect our homes and our electric prices. The next area is revenue sharing. And as a Flushing Township trustee, I watch those dollars get cut and cut and cut. And that's why our local roads are struggling to get repaired. So many neighborhoods are just frustrated with the condition. And it's because they can't afford them, nor can they afford to retain some of our police officers because there's just been cuts and cuts and cuts to their contracts, all because of what the state has done. And finally, education. As an educator for 25 years, I've watched so many struggle points with our students with mental health, which only got worse with COVID, trying to get kids into the skilled trades because of the Michigan Merit curriculums. And
Thank you very much. That's the end of your time.
no, I thought I
Yep, she has another 30 seconds. My apologies.
Oh, I'm
you.
sorry. We had two hands. Reset that.
I apologize.
Sorry.
Okay.
Let's go
One of
ahead.
the things that
Sorry.
I would say is it's not just going to be the ARPA funds that are coming in. We've had money come in from a variety of sources, but unfortunately, they haven't always gone back into our local communities. Oftentimes, some of those same dollars that they're giving to, for instance, roads, have required some matching dollars from the county, and communities have really been struggling. So I love the fact that we have all this money coming in for ARPA, and we get to use quite a few over the years. But we also need to make sure that we're preparing long term. So outside of the next 5 years, how are we preparing our communities for sustainable, renewable energy, good union jobs that have give people voices, and all of those areas are things that I'm ready and willing and going to be fighting for our communities. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad we didn't have any other time issue there. Sorry for the little mishap. Sometimes that happens. And now Ms. Johnson will go ahead with question 3. I believe Jasper Martis is your first.
Jasper's my first. Thank you. Question 3 is, what best practices will you employ when making decisions on behalf of residents of the 69th district? So, Mr. Martis.
So the reason why I'm so active in knocking doors is not just to earn people's votes, but to learn their stories. When you're showing up at a person's door, you experience people in their lives at every stage of their life. I've talked to young couples who are about ready to have their first child. I've talked to older folks who are looking forward to one day where their grandkids will be moving back. So having real roots in a community are important. It's not just my family roots. When I knock in Hamady, my grandpa taught there for 41 years. In Flushing, it's the place I've always called home. So you have those family roots of understanding a community, but then when you're knocking doors as well, you learn much more. So in terms of decision making and so forth, having a real understanding of what your community needs is important. Secondly, I'm very open about my faith. I'm a proud Catholic, and I think it's important to have a faith informing your decisions. And that's always about taking care of the least of these, making sure that we see God in every person we interact with and factoring that into the decisions that we make. And finally, having a real sense of history. I've always been a person who has loved history. And one of the hardest parts about running for office is I don't have time to read all my history books that I normally love. But having an understanding of leaders in the past, when they were confronted with issues, how did they deal with that? And then moving forward. So I think it's important when you're making decisions to have an understanding of your community, to have an understanding of your faith and of how you interact with those folks. And then finally, that real sense of history. And when you're working in Lansing and in the work that I've done for various state representatives, oftentimes it doesn't matter if there's a B or an R next to your name. It matters that you're showing up and that you have a voice in the room. So I have a record of working with Republicans when I was working in the state house, and that oftentimes came from finding that common ground of when those funds are being doled out, when that's the discussion of the day, just making sure that you have a voice in the room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to question 4. What
Yes.
efforts? Pardon?
We're
Oh,
still at.
Oh, I'm terribly
Right.
sorry.
We have the candidates. It's fine.
One of those days. Sorry about that.
I understand we're having technical issues and everything. We apologize, you all. So the same question, what best practices will you employ when making decisions on the on the behalf of residents for the 69th district, Ms. Almasi?
So, and I apologize because you just broke up twice in the middle of that. Can you repeat that one more time?
What best practices will you employ when making decisions on behalf of the residents of the 69th district?
Thank you. When I want to employ any kind of issue, I know that it has to go back to our community members. And we've watched some really good examples of that with coffee hours and meeting with people over and over again on both sides, whether it would be Ken Horn as a senator or John Cherry as a House representative. Those coffee hours and giving people a voice is very important. But we can't just talk to our neighbors and our friends when those issues are coming up because you'll only get one side. So you really have to make sure that you're reaching out and getting a variety of voices to make sure you're meeting the needs of the community and allowing them to have that voice. I believe that we need to have, I will have regular opportunities for our community members to meet, and I will continue to meet with them throughout the time. But I think that when you're looking for common ground, it can't just be an all or nothing thing. It has to be finding where can we get started and start with those smaller pieces versus saying, I want all of this and or I don't want to talk to you at all. And finding common ground is something I've had to do as an educator for 25 years. I've been able to work with students that really struggle, and you can't just say one method, you have to try and try again. So that method is something I would bring to the House as well in working with people on both sides of the fence. And I know that as a leader over time, those are things that I had to do while I was on the Flushing Township Trustee Board or the Genesee Metro Alliance, and looking to see where you can help those that are the most unfortunate times are some of the places that we can really make sure we hit common ground because their voice needs to be heard more than somebody that's just in the wants. The needs of life, people's needs are really important for us to make sure we meet. So you have to look outside of your circle. And that's something I will absolutely do as a legislator.
Thank you. The same question for you, Ms. Dotson. What best practices will you employ when making decisions on behalf of residents of the 69th district?
Thank you for that question. So some of the best practices that I will employ is many of the things I've learned over the past 25 years. This work didn't come easy. Is really hard to understand the impact that societal issues are having on family systems, on individuals who are just trying to make it, trying to have the best life they possibly can for themselves, their families, their communities. And one of those best practices is making sure that I'm listening and truly hearing the voice of the people, and then carrying that forward to identify who are the best partners to collaborate with, to bring to the table, to find the most appropriate resources and services, to truly get solutions to the questions and the discussions and the conversations that we've had and that I've heard from the people within community. Being in community at a grassroots level, one thing that I've noticed that has been missing, and although I've had a great partnership and collaboration between many congresspeople, state representatives, senators, and others, community partners and residents, we have to have a system of communication and a system of collaboration across the board. When we hear the people talking and expressing what they're going through and the impact that society is having on their family, we have to carry that forward in order to apply laws and policies to truly have a direct impact, to make life better for those who are living out what we are creating laws around. And what I've heard people say is politicians, they politic, they come around during election time, but oftentimes we aren't seeing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times throughout the year after the voting cycle ends. And people want to see us in the neighborhood meetings
Thank you.
and at the block clubs and also in the
Yep.
township meetings
Time has expired.
beyond our candidacy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to question 4. And this time we begin. I've confused myself by trying to alternate the order. I apologize. So now I believe we begin with Ms. Almasi on this particular question. Very well. What efforts would you take as an elected leader to ensure transparency and access in governance?
Transparency is one of the leading issues that I've had on a variety of different levels, including in our education system. So we're going to start there and then I'll work into some areas. When you look at charter schools that are getting taxpayer dollars, they're not required the same transparency rules that public schools are, and yet they're getting the same monies. When I look at what could make them stronger and better options, it'd be requiring the same transparency that public schools are required. When you look at funding for something like our voters, to the candidates, when we look at those dollars, they've done a better job of requiring transparency of who's, I'm going to use the word buying our candidates. And I think that we need to be more transparent so people know who those candidates are owed to. And that's something that we can work on and do better with. When we look at the transparency of our local offices, I think that we've done a really good job of requiring the FOIA rules to require our offices to really meet up to those needs. If people ask for it, they should be able to get it. The problem is sometimes they really lack the amount of time to do it. And so they kind of drag their feet a little or start charging monies that are ridiculous. The Freedom of Information Act should be available to every level of government, and it should have a smaller amount of timelines and not be prohibitive in cost so that people can get that information. So as a leader, where do I think that we can do, that I can do a better job is really look back at how people get that information and the information that's being withheld from them and making sure it's more transparent to the community members that want to find it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dodson, same question. What efforts would you take as an elected leader to ensure transparency and access in government?
Thank you. What I would do to create better transparency and access. When I think about transparency and access, I also think about honesty. I think about being responsible. I think about being accountable for the things that we say we're going to do as leaders, as representatives of the people's voice. And what I would say is, I think transparency and access is hugely important. Coming from Flint, understanding the impact that Flint residents had on, as it relates to the Flint water crisis, having lead in the water, families being impacted. I know how important it is to have transparency. And I understand that our word as elected officials and also as people who are leaders and taking responsibility for being on the front line of, in many cases, that is really important for us to stand behind our word and do what it is that we say we're going to do, and to also be accountable for those things. So I think that is really important. And what I would do is I would make sure that I'm listening to the people. I'm doing my due diligence and the best that I can do in carrying the voice of the people forward to make sure that they're an active part of the legislative process to the best of my ability in all ways that I possibly can. I've always done that throughout my course of being an advocate in community, and I will continue to do that as a state representative. Transparency, access to information, access to this legislative process is hugely important. And as leaders, we need to be held responsible and accountable for the things that we say we're going to do, especially while we're campaigning. It shouldn't stop after that.
Thank you. Mr. Martis, same questions. What efforts would you take as an elected leader to ensure transparency and access in government?
So there was a study commissioned in 2019 nationally, and it ranked states in the United States based on government transparency and oversight. And Michigan ranked second to last. Now, when it comes to how we can make Michigan more transparent at the state level, some of it comes from a personal standpoint, but there's also policies that we can implement as well. From a personal standpoint, having worked for a number of state representatives, I've seen the good that state representatives can do, but I've also seen where folks go crooked and go the other way. And the biggest way to prevent that is transparency when it comes to the individual elected official and making sure they can be held accountable, that their feet are held to the fire. Every single piece of literature I hand out has my personal cell phone on it. It's not a burner phone like in Breaking Bad or a Google phone number. It's my personal cell phone number, the same one that I talk to my grandparents and friends on. It's because, as I tell folks on doors, if you ever need anything at all, please give me a call and I'll be there to help in whatever capacity I can. That's what I learned from great leaders like Senator Ananick and Representative Sneller that support me, that you have to be able to be held accountable by the folks that you represent. So that's from a personal leadership standpoint, what we try to do on the campaign. From a policy standpoint, there's a lot of what many would say common sense ethics reforms that we can implement when it comes to financial disclosures of our elected officials at the state level, making sure that state representatives are held accountable by being able to be FOIA'd, which in most states they can, but in Michigan, that's not the case. But something I also really care about is campaign finance reform. I spend a lot of time knocking doors when I'm campaigning, but I also have to spend a lot of time raising money. I've been lucky enough to be able to do that because a lot of those networks were the same folks, were from the folks that I used to work for, different elected officials. But in politics, money talks and the wealthy have a megaphone. And I think we need to implement robust campaign finance reform so that people running for office can spend more time talking to hardworking, working class people and not just trying to get money to fund their own campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
now, Ms. Johnson, thanks.
Okay. I'm starting my questions off with Ms. Dodson. And Ms. Dodson, how would you work as a state legislator to improve public safety and blight elimination in local communities?
Thank you, Jaquanda. Public safety and blight elimination.
Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yeah, would you please? I just want to make sure I got it correctly.
How would you work as a state legislator to improve public safety and blight elimination in local communities?
Thank you. First of all, in terms of public safety, I've worked in the area of public safety for forever, for a long period of time. And I understand public safety isn't something that one person can do alone, one organization, one agency, one church. Everybody have to work together in terms of, as it relates to public safety. And in order to adequately address the issue of public safety, we have to work together with law enforcement. We have to make sure that we are passing policies and laws that support our law enforcement, and also that provides resources and services to grassroots organizations. Everybody have to work together as it relates to public safety. Not one person can do this by itself. Violence, public safety, whether it's within the home, within community, it stems from unmet needs. It stems from our societal issues. And these are the things that violence is perpetuated because people feel unsupported, because they don't have jobs, because their family system is broken. So all of us have to work together. And so I would definitely make sure that that law enforcement have what they need in terms of resources and services, and also that community have what they need. And then they all have to, again, that system of communication and collaboration, we have to work together across the board, talking about and strategizing and creating action plans around public safety. As it relates to blight elimination, if we have blight within our community, we will have violence within our community. We have to make sure that we are living, we collectively as a total body of people are living in beautiful, safe, communities that we can all be proud of. And again, we need to make sure that cities and our communities have the resources that they need in order to eliminate the blight safely. And then the persons at the grassroots level are able to have great programs and services so that they can also have the resources they need to eliminate blight at a community level.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The same question for you, Mr. Martis. How would you work as a state legislator to improve public safety and blight elimination in local communities?
Absolutely. So when I was working at the State House in the last budget in the fall of 2021, I was able to work on some aspects of the budget that led to the largest investments of public safety in decades in the state of Michigan. Now, I'm lucky enough to have the support of the Police Officers Association of Michigan. But I understand that public safety is not just about law enforcement. We need to have a more comprehensive approach to keeping our communities safe. It's about making sure that our police officers and police departments are adequately funded. We don't just have the problem of police officers not being paid as much right now, which leads to less people getting involved. We also have a problem of we had a record number of police officers who were hired in the late 90s. Now those folks are retiring. So we have a lot of folks who are retiring as police officers and a lot of people who are discouraged from going into law enforcement, which is leading to far less police officers on the beat. So I think it's important that we continue to fund our police departments and work with our police officers, but it's also taking that comprehensive approach of working with community organizations, whether it's block parties and block groups, or local health, community health centers, mental health centers, and homeless shelters, of making sure we're taking this comprehensive approach and kind of tying the getting rid of blight back to it. A lot of these problems stem from a lack of economic opportunity. When people don't have the chance to succeed, when they don't have the chance to take care of their families, that's what leads to a lot of these issues. So what underpins all of this is trying to provide more opportunities for communities, specifically communities that have been historically disenfranchised by institutional racism and other problems. But we need to take this comprehensive approach. It's about funding our law enforcement, it's about working with community leaders, and it's about providing opportunities for every member of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Almasi, the same question for you. How would you work as a state legislator to improve public safety and blight elimination in local communities?
So public safety is multifaceted. We've both of the previous people spoke on police, but I would like to add in the police, the fire, and the EMS. You know, as we talk to neighbors in our communities, there are some struggle points there, and all of them tend to affect our public safety. We have the issues of our EMS now coming from different locations and fewer of them. And a lot of it has to do with revenue sharing. And I spoke on that previously. Revenue sharing has been cut for our local communities and why they can't afford a lot of these things. So that is definitely one of my focal points in the fact that we need to increase our revenue sharing. It can't just be just the way it is. Now, part of that includes the training for our police officers and the training for our firefighters. So much new has come in and they can't even afford to practice those new techniques and to make sure that we're getting good officers on the beat. And when we talk about other areas of public safety, including our Black groups, we also need to work on some of our mental health and job economic issues because the domestic violence also creates an unsafe area and issues that we need to address as legislators. Now for the blight, the ARPA dollars coming in is a great opportunity because these are one-time dollars that we can be using to clean up our areas. But we could also be working on using our land bank a little better and allowing our community members to purchase homes to clean them up. But what we do have to practice is safety on whether or not those same people can come in and overprice our rentals. So we need to have affordable housing. And oftentimes people are saying things like, oh, well, we can, use some blight dollars to clean stuff up and bring in more low income housing. And we have some great opportunities for people to do that, even in rebuilding old schools into housing. But just as we saw in Swartz Creek area, we really have to represent our lowest economic individuals and making sure that they're not abused as well in that blight removal and raising the prices of our rent for them. So thank you.
Thank you,
you.
Chelmsford. Okay, question 6. Oh, excuse me, question 5. No.
Question 6.
I really must be. I need to explain. We changed the order somewhat from what we've done in previous forums, so I think it's thrown us just a little bit. Sorry about that. So the question 6 is similar to the previous question in some ways, but it enlarges into some other areas. So beginning with you, Ms. Dotson. How would you approach ensuring that local communities receive the revenue they need from the state government to fund basic local services such as parks, recreation centers, transportation, and public safety?
That was definitely a loaded question, and I promise I went first like 5 different times. No, I'm just kidding. But so can you please say that again? I wasn't expecting to go first again, so I definitely need that question again.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, how would you approach ensuring that local communities receive the revenue they need from the state government to fund basic local services such as parks, recreation centers, transportation, and public safety?
Thank you for that question. Parks, recreation centers, transportation, and public safety. What I would do is what I've always done. And I don't know if I know it's by nature. It's who I am as a person. I'm a collaborator, I'm a connector by nature. That's just who I am as a person. And so I've always looked for ways to connect people together in order to make life better and in order to make life easier for people. I stand by a saying which says, let's work smarter and not harder. And one way we do that is by linking together, leveraging the resources that we have. And although we may not like each other at times, but we have to communicate. We have to talk, and we have to figure out how to do what we need to do in order to serve those that we say we're committed to serve. And thinking about that, in order to make sure that folks have the revenue in order to have access to parks and recreation and transportation and public safety, I worked with a team to make sure that all police officers within the city of Flint had mental health first aid training. I've collaborated in different ways in order to make sure that those who have the resources come together in order to provide the services for the people who need it the most. And parks, we already know when our kids and our families are able to go to parks, it helps from a mental health perspective. It helps from a physical health perspective. And it also the same as it relates to public safety. I will work very hard, as I have throughout the course of my life, to make sure that we have the revenue that we need to enhance public safety, to strengthen access to transportation, and to make sure that our families and our communities can have access to parks and recreational activities.
Thank you. Mr. Martis, same question. How would you approach ensuring that local communities receive the revenue they need from the state government to fund basic local services such as parks, recreation centers, transportation, and public safety?
So no elected official, best elected official in the world, can get what needs to be done for a community on their own. It takes collaboration, cooperation, and in many cases, all levels of government working together. And I've had experience at all those levels. When I worked for Congressman Kildee for a number of years as a caseworker, I was in the office, I was with him in meetings, I was understanding the way in which the federal government works and how we can make what goes on in DC get back here to Genesee County. When I was working at the State House in Lansing, I saw the amount of funds that get spent and the best way to spend those funds, and most importantly, how we can get those sorts of funds back to a community like ours. And at a local level, I've worked with city council members, mayors, and other community activists for people in communities, not only across the district, but across the county. So if we really want to get these programs done, whether it's spending the ARPA and infrastructure funds effectively or taking advantage of these new economic opportunities we can pursue, it's going to take an all hands on deck approach, federal, state, county, and local officials working together. I'm lucky enough to be able to say that folks from all those level of governments are in my corner, and they understand that for a community like ours to get those resources, they need an advocate in Lansing who understands the process. So whether we're talking about transportation, making sure that we're investing in electric vehicles, which not only will save our environment, but will also create good paying jobs here in Genesee County. Whether it's taking care of our parks and natural resources, which not only provides new opportunities for folks to enjoy themselves at a low cost, it's also a great way to combat climate change and preserve our environment. To get all these things done, it's not done by one person or one individual or one level of government. It's all levels of government working together. I've had experience in all those levels of government, and I want to take a small part in that process to make sure all levels of government are working for the folks in the 69. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Almasi. And how would you ensure that local communities receive that revenue from the state government to fund those basic services such as parks, recreation centers, transportation, and public safety?
So this is something I'm very passionate about because as a Flushing Township trustee, I watched those dollars get cut and why we couldn't afford to do a lot of the things for our parks and our communities that needed to be done. As I was starting my campaign, I went to most of all of the township and city meetings, and I met with many of the supervisors of those areas and mayors because I believe that we need to know what our communities need in order to help them. To say that we need to give money for those individual things is great, but we also need to find out which communities need what. And it's not a one size fits all thing. So if you look at Montrose Township, that has a lot of extra monies coming in for from the landfill, they don't need as much money for some of the things that say Clayton Township needs. And as I've met with all the different township supervisors and mayors, something that has come very, very clear to me is when the state brings these dollars in and they require where you're going to use it, it's just not the best use of the money because some communities don't need it for one or the other, and we really need to let the local control get back into how dollars are spent. So for instance, if you look at Flushing Township, we have a nature park, and in order for us to keep up some of the things that need to be done, they do need those funds. And in Vienna Township, they're struggling with issues with some of their local roads. When we look at how those dollars are used, as a legislator, I would like to make sure that we increase our revenue sharing, which is something I've mentioned in almost all the other questions, but also not anti how those dollars are used, and to let the local officials make the best decisions for their communities and how those dollars are spent.
Okay, thank you. I guess that brings us to the last question, Ms. Johnson.
Yes, this is the last question, and I'll start with Mr. Martis. Why should voters consider electing you to this office?
So when somebody's running for office and people are looking to support them, oftentimes they'll either look for the change candidate, somebody who's offering fresh perspectives, new ideas, or they'll go with the tried and tested person who's been around the block and understands the process. I feel our candidacy is unique because I'm young enough to offer a fresh perspective, but experienced enough to get the job done. When I'm knocking on doors, folks are excited that I'm on the younger side of things. They're excited, whether they're 18 or 118, that young people are taking up new opportunities for leadership in our community and in our state. But I'm experienced enough to get the job done. I've worked for Congressman Kildee. I've worked for the State House in Lansing. I had to leave my job at the State House to run for the State House. And I've learned through that experience that the only way a community like ours gets the resources and respect it deserves is if our community has an advocate in the room. And the last thing I'll end on is you can tell a lot about an elected official, how they'll serve in office, based on how they run their campaign. I campaigned 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. And through that experience, knocking on doors, making calls, going to community events, I hear from folks what's on their mind. They want to make sure our community has an advocate in the room whose roots in the community run deep, who's offering fresh, bold ideas to reverse the trend that we've experienced of folks moving away, families being broken up, and all of us made worse off. But also having that understanding of how the process works and having those folks in their corner. So it's the honor of a lifetime to be able to run for elected office. I've always had a love of politics. I've worked in politics, but I never imagined I'd be doing it at this point in my life. But sometimes the opportunity presents itself and you can't say no. For all the challenges that our community is facing and experiencing, we need to make sure we have a strong advocate in the room. And I hope, God willing, on August 2nd, you'll choose me as that person. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dotson, the same question for you. Why should voters consider electing you to this office?
Thank you. I think voters should consider electing me to this office because I've listened to the voice of the people. I continue to listen to the voice of the people. And regardless to what happens after August 2nd, guess what? I'm going to still be around because I was around before and I'll be around after. I have been a part of listening circles throughout the district regarding the ARPA funds. I want to be well informed about what dollars are coming in to every area within the district. And I want to know how they're being utilized. I want to make sure that I'm able to do the best job I possibly can as a state representative. But in order to do that, I have to be well informed. Not only that, there was a ride along in Mount Morris Township. They wanted their voice to be heard. So they called together State Representative John Cherry. They called together congressmen and others, and local residents also did this ride along as well. There's probably 25 cars or so on this ride along. And they expressed their concerns and their voice around what's going on in their area. And I was a part of that because I want to be well informed. This didn't just happen because I decided to run for state representative. This isn't new to me. And making sure that our families, our community, our society is a good, healthy, safe place for all of us to live that we can be proud of, that's important to me. And so I also ask that you consider me come August 2nd, that you make the best choice that you possibly can. And I want you to know that I'm listening to what it is that you're saying. Not only listening, but I hear your voice and I will carry you into the room, to the table with me. We need to take our personal experiences to the state level with our elected officials.
Thank you. Ms. Almasi, the same question. Ms. Almasi, I'm sorry. The same
That's okay.
question. Why should voters consider electing you to this office?
I think voters should elect me because I am just like you. I'm a homeowner. I'm a taxpayer. I had to pay my student loans. I know how much these financial issues have hit us. And because I'm experienced, I'm an experienced educator for 25 years, as an elected leader, and as a community member, I know what we need to get done, and I know how to get it done and how to work with others to meet those needs. And also because I have broad-based support. Not only have I gotten my teacher union, my educator union to support me, I've also gotten the SEIU and the food workers unions, as well as the police and the firefighters unions. I've gotten the corn growers, and I've gotten a whole lot of our local municipalities, township supervisors to support me. And that support says that they know I'm going to support them in their task of running their communities. And finally, I'm a Democrat, but I'm a moderate. I believe that we need to get back to having common sense conversations with our people, our elected officials, to get jobs done. And that includes, difficult topics, whether it's our right to choose as women for our own reproductive health, or responsible gun ownership. We need to be able to find that common ground. And as a level-headed, experienced, tested leader, I'm the person that should be elected to do that. I know that we have a great group of people running, and I do hope that you do your homework and vote for Jennifer Almasi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
And also, I would like to thank you all for joining us and